Good morning, everyone. Looks like we are just a minute away as being as punctual as possible. I have about 8 participants. I know others are going to be joining us. We have a simple agenda, but with a lot of things that are occurring. Brian, if you could put up the agenda, that would be wonderful. Perfect. Make it a little bit larger for all. So we're going to start with Wendy, ESSER 2 closeout. And I know we just had a more of a down in the detailed view of this. One of the things that we are looking for from our federal government partner is to give us the authority that if there's any ESSER 2 monies that have not been, how do I want to say, used in our districts, to be able to reallocate them across our state. And that's one of the questions that hasn't been quite answered yet, but we'll get into that with Wendy. We have rigorous action that is changing our ESSA law in order that they're allowing Montana to submit the plan for what does rigorous action mean. So when we have to rank our schools, all of our schools, not just districts, but our schools, by certain measures, those ones that are at the very bottom that have also stayed in it for a period of time. What does Montana's rigorous action mean? And then, of course, we're getting into some legislation. House Bill 393 on the Education Savings Account, something very new to our state. Other states have worked within this realm, but we are putting emphasis on it in a Montana way, but also listening to what other states have done very successfully and trying to stay away from any challenges that there might be. And then we have education, Indian education for all in the budget reporting. That was also a bill given to us by Representative Wendy Boy. And then we have Mr. Taylor talking about the fall count. So I'm hoping we've got a few more that have populated. Wendy, take it away.
All right. So Brian, do you want to, I can't, oh, there we go. Okay. And if you can make that larger. So just that top level view is again what I'd shared last month, and it shows sort of the timeline that we're working with ESSER, and then the amount that we still have that we're working on from an expenditure. And the main part there to really understand is the fact that there's still a tremendous amount of flexibility, as the superintendent was indicating. In addition to that 188 million that we still have out there in 3, there are components of 2 which we are looking to be able to give to other districts who may need some extra funding if the feds indicate that we can do that. And we're hopeful that that will come about. Our system of support is really Monday through Saturday, and I want to emphasize that because we have had some great conversations, particularly with superintendents and district clerks who are working on the weekends or after hours, especially in the spend down mode. So that's happening a lot. The capital expenditure components, those larger projects, we have 791 that we're currently tracking. And those, of course, are going to be bridging into ESSER 3. So it's not just a discussion on 2, it's also moving into 3 as we begin to close out the full ESSER component. We have 600 of them currently that are either approved or need a little bit of tweaking to approve them. I kind of gave a snapshot here of what those look like. There's curriculum about 76. There are about 103 in the safety arena that deal with cameras, doors, and fences. And the fences I know seem a little bit odd, but some of our schools are putting out outdoor learning spaces, and they're right in front of that school parking lot. And so maybe they didn't have that space utilized that way. And now you've got elementary school students right there at the front where the cars are. So really looking intentionally not just about the outdoor space use, but also obviously the safety of the children. We've got a large number happening in the HVAC, that air component, spread of infection area, 262 roughly. And then the water encompasses a lot of different things, including touchless sinks and faucets. Those transportation vehicles was hitting it a lot of summer and after school programming. Many of our schools did not have bus drivers who could run those extra routes. And so getting vehicles that would allow that transportation to happen is part of this ESSER funding. And again, the outdoor learning space, we're going to be bridging into that a little bit more and sharing some stories out later on with that. There's some really innovative projects being done, and it's really nice to see how those funds are being used that way. Student voice has been used a lot in those projects where students have gotten together and said, how could we utilize the outdoor space of our building? They've made presentations to their school boards and learned math, as one superintendent told me up in Leicester. So it's really nice to see that involvement of student in that capacity. On our self-assessment monitoring platform, those are out there right now. They are due by the end of the month. We have 94 in right now, and I know everybody's really busy, so it's hard to get to those, but really appreciate any support that we can get in getting those finished and brought forward. Again, the main reason for those is really to look at how can OPI better support the districts in their efforts of this large grant management. Toward that end, I wanted to show just a public view, the monthly reporting that we do. It can be seen in several different ways. So the public view is available for anybody who wants to go see, you know, how is my district spending money? How is it being allocated? What is the current spending status? And all of that is available on our website and available in different reporting formats, but also at an individual view per district. So superintendent, that's kind of that high level view of where everything is moving with ESSER. Are there any questions?
Wendy, just to reiterate from myself, the ESSER 3, because ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 were very, very similar. How much ESSER 3 do we still have that has not been pulled down by schools?
We have about 188 million.
188 million. And there was a total of how much in that pot to begin with?
381.
Okay, so they have been working on it, which is great. And then let's look at ESSER 2. How much in ESSER 2 are we looking at closing the door on? And then what might be reallocated?
So currently we have about 3.5 million that hasn't been brought out yet or brought down fully. We're anticipating to bring that down to about 2 and may even get it to 1. So that's going to be that question from the Department of Ed. Can we move those funds slightly differently? We have been working with districts. Some of them may have allocated funds for ESSER 3, actually already expended those that could have been used in 2. And we are backfilling that so that we can help them spend the 2 down, but it's a little bit of a juggle in the accounting system. So we're working with that.
Exactly. And you were on with which school at 10 o'clock last night?
With Browning. They've been wonderful working with us on that. So it's been good.
So it is, everyone is very busy. And I just want to compliment our team here as being very, very pliable in making sure that the burden of, and I hate to say this, the burden of these extra dollars, but it's being shared by our good people with Wendy and her team, as well as with the school districts. So thank you for that. And then the other part is the self-assessment. And if you would just reiterate, the self-assessment is something that Montana chose. We needed to assess the schools. We went to a self-assessment tool. But if we only have 1/4 of our districts completing this at this point, and it needs to be done by the end of November, will there be any extension? Or, you know, the manner of how do we get the rest of the 3/4 of the districts in order to work on their self-assessment?
I think this is always a challenge. When we did the data collection this last year, districts were absolutely amazing and getting it all done in 2 weeks. It was a much harder pull on that platform, but it was only 2 weeks. This time we did use, and we constantly use a review committee to evaluate the timing that we're pushing things out and the manner in which we're formatting the request. And they asked for a longer period of time. So we did give a longer period of time. But of course, when you do that, there's often the standpoint of, well, I'll wait a little bit longer. So I think as we get into this coming week before Thanksgiving, I think we'll pretty much have it shored up before then. I feel pretty confident districts have received them. They don't feel that it's too much of a challenge to get it done. It's long. I will say it's over 100 questions, but most of them are true and false. And so I think once they dive into it, it's a really pretty straightforward process and they'll be able to complete. But no, we aren't planning on giving any extensions. So this is a review of ESSER 1 through 3, what policies and procedures you have in place, what things OPI can assist with. It's part of the Department of Education's ask on various levels, and other states have done them every year in a very large narrative format. We chose to do it this way to help with the burden of support so that it's distributed in a different way. And the feedback we've gotten has been positive, but it does need to be done. So that is something out there that still is waiting.
Excellent. Any other questions for Wendy? We're working really hard here to make sure that our schools, of course, are being heard or listened and how we can work with them. Pam, looks like the data collection is complicated because districts, let me pull that back up. Data collection is complicated because districts do have to go back and find dates, etc. This came from Pam Birkland. So quite possibly, Wendy, you can reach to her and see exactly what solution we can offer. Again, we want to make sure that it is easy, that it is, of course, accountable and hits everything that the Fed is requiring. Yep. And Pam says she worked on it yesterday. It just takes time. Yep. Agreed. And that is something that is a short commodity. Thank you, Pam. All right. Like to move forward then. Rigorous action. Carrie, do I have you on?
Carrie.
I don't believe I do at this point. Let's go ahead and Christy, let's go to education savings account. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Brian, for sharing the screen for me. House Bill 393 was sponsored by Representative Vinton, and it is the Education Savings Account Act. It is establishing students with special needs savings account for them. The requirements in the bill require that these qualified students are between the ages of 5 and 18. They must have been counted in a public school for the previous school year for A and B purposes, and they must have an identified disability category under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Right now, we are currently in the stage of researching other states that have implemented this type of legislation, including Arkansas, Arizona, Iowa, Texas, Mississippi, Utah. Many states have started down and have legislation similar to this. And so we're looking to them in order to really understand how to move forward. Look out, as the superintendent mentioned earlier, watching out for potential challenges that might come up. And so we're really reaching out to those states to understand how they've implemented this type of legislation and moving forward. We're also investigating a technology solution that would be a type of online resource that would help us transfer the funds through the OPI to the families. And we are still investigating and gathering information on that. And then one of our interesting parts of the legislation is that our legislation requires student funds to be separate. They cannot be commingled. And many of the online services actually sort of commingle the funding for students, and our legislation does not allow that. So those are some of the challenges that we're working with the legislation, but we're reaching out to those other states to understand how they've dealt with these upcoming issues and so on. The other exciting part that we have started on this bill, we are getting ready to open applications for a parent steering committee to involve parents in as we move forward with this legislation and the implementation here at the OPI, and really have that parent perspective in helping guide us in our decisions as we go forward. Any questions? Oh,
Thank you, Christy. I
There we
very
go.
much appreciate the national view of what other states have done with this, but it is, of course, a Montana-made bill. And the difficulty is finding a vendor in the banking arena to be able to make sure that we fulfill the letter of the law, that we don't commingle, but that is also having a high fiduciary responsibility of reporting and everything. So we've talked to some vendors and want to make sure that they can make that Montana view. We are not Arizona, where they had the very first one of these, and we are not these other states as well. We have to be very unique. So Christy's working hard at it, and we're taking this month to just really plow the field of what other states have done so that we can put our stamp on it with what is legally allowed in our state. But with that, waiting then for others to be here. Mr. Taylor, let's go ahead with your presentation on the count.
Yep, it helps if you unmute. Okay, so as far as the fall count, enrollment count goes, the first Monday of October is a statutory requirement for collecting enrolled students to public schools in the state. We take that value and modify it to what we term student count for A and B. So you may notice in box A, it's titled Fall Student Count 2015 through 24. And student count is just a massaged number from the enrollment values that we remove students who do not count for A and B purposes. Anyway, it's a graph of information from that fall student count between for a 10-year period. And what you may notice is I ran a regression line or a trend line through the values that is slightly downturned. The expectation would have been in 2024 an increase in enrollment, and rather what we found is a downturn. There's a secondary dip in the graph where you see an FY in 2021. There's a dip. That's the COVID pandemic dip in enrollment. So it was somewhat unexpected to see a decrease of about 2,000 fall enrolled students or student count students between 23 and 24. And that got us to question, why is there this decrease? So in box B, thanks, Brian. In box B here, what you'll see is an aggregated and a slightly disaggregated view of what we noted. And so I'll just go through the total box, and you might notice that below it's disaggregated by elementary, middle, and high school budget units. Just as a primer, in case you're unaware, the funding box essentially is a budget unit, not necessarily a district, so we can separate things as elementary, middle, and high school for specific funding purposes. But let's just talk about the total box. That's the top one in the B area. The fall enrollment count for 2023 and 2024 are noted in the top left. The difference is a decline in approximately 2,000 students, which is 1.2% of the overall total. Keep in mind that that decrease is representative of other districts that actually had increases. So there's offsetting, adjustment. In the middle box where it says specific for decrease, and that's why I made this note, is if we go down through those numbers, the total number of budget units with enrolled students in FY 2024 was 675. And of those 675, 146 had significant student count decreases. So what we did to determine significance was to say that the decrease had to be at least 5 enrolled students, or 5 student count for A and B students, and 3% of the total budget unit enrollment or student count for A and B. So they had to have both of those variables to determine significance. So 21 or almost 22% of our school districts experienced a budget unit with a significant decrease. And note that it says significant student count for A and B totals is 2,427. And you may question, well, why is that so much more than what you said the total change was of 1,808 over on the left there? It's because this is considering only decreases and not offsetting increases. And so we determined that that's a large decrease, and it sort of caused a little concern throughout people who are concerned with these numbers. So if you don't mind, scroll down to box C, Brian. Or maybe Brian's not doing it, it's just magic. Anyway. So what this did was it fired off a phone call, a whole bunch of phone calls. And I want to give credit here. Autumn Belmont, Lacey Novark, and Olivia Jenkins and myself did much of these phone calls. We called 75 school districts. There may have actually been a few more. So 75 was the large part of the significantly impacted districts. And we heard a lot of information back via email and these phone calls. So districts gave reasoning behind why there was decreases that they noticed. And you can see here that some of the school districts are actually waiting for an import update to their data. Now that's internal, and you can see it says waiting on update for data import. There's 6 districts waiting on that, and that would change the decline in enrollment by approximately 200 students. So the 2,000 would be lessened by about 200. That actually has something to do with a form that was required that maybe is no longer required. So that's an adjustment that would be needed. Specific to things that won't change the values, 11 districts reported that they had large grade shifts, meaning that they saw a large grade moving out of, say, for example, 6th grade into 7th grade. And 7th grade is a middle school budget unit, as opposed to the 6th grade, which would have been the elementary. And so they saw a large block of students moving into a different budget unit. 17 districts reported that they saw that students were just leaving the districts and going to a different district. And also they saw a large number of students going into homeschooling situations. So that accounted for approximately 250 of the student count in the phone calls that we made. And then other was about 10 districts, which accounts for about 340 of the enrollment adjustment. And it was very interesting, the other comments. One is we had a border checkpoint close over in the east side of the state, and so they lost families because of that. We actually heard a fair number of districts report that students that had come here during the pandemic are now leaving the state. And so they're believe that they're going back to the states in which they originated from. We actually heard that a considerable number of times. And, you know, other various reasons were given. So we just sort of batched those together. There was an additional 33 districts that just verified the numbers and didn't give reasoning behind why the adjustments. So that was, approximately 1,000 enrolled students through those 31 districts were just saying, well, we had a decrease, and they verified their numbers as correct and accurate to our system. So currently it looks like we're down by about 2,000 students. Shock. So that's your summary.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions of Mr. Taylor?
I have a question. This is Nancy Hall at the Budget Office. And do we expect there will be additional enrollment adjustments coming from some of these that, I mean, if you called 75 of the 140, do we expect others to come in with changes?
Yeah, Nancy, and this is I mean, you and I are very close on this. Next year, this will be much more concerning. We're already in mid-November. I just got handed to me this morning a file that says there'll be 106 adjustment districts that require adjustments. And I'm promised that those adjustments are small. Like for Billings, there's going to be an adjustment that's like a dozen kids or 15 kids. But then I was assured that of the 106 other districts, which is a quarter of our districts, there are additional adjustments being made that would equate to like 1 or 2 kids in either direction, hopeful that there would be offsetting adjusting. But this is very late for us to be making this number of adjustments on this scale, and it's somewhat concerning, especially next year, because we'll have to have the EPP to the governor by November 1, and we're looking at November 14th right now. So yes, I'm concerned that we find a way to streamline this before we get to next year's fall collection.
Right, right. Well, yeah, because we have to have the budget in place on the 15th by statute for next year.
Right, and I got to get it to you by the 1st.
Yeah, yeah. So it has to be all finalized. So do we have the non-public school homeschool count yet?
I believe it exists, and I did mention that to Nicole, and she's overwhelmed at the time, and she said that yes, she'll take a look and get me that information when she can. That usually comes out. I usually can get it unofficially, but that usually comes out, I believe, in December. So I might be able to pester her again and
Because
see.
then we can compare and see if, because you've got on here that part of these went to homeschool, and if we could see what that count change is for that would be helpful.
So yeah, it's a little concerning that we're seeing this sort of like oscillation in enrollment that we hadn't seen for quite some time. When I first started working here, everybody was declining in all the school districts. And then we saw sort of a saddle in all the budget units. EM and H were all growing for, oh boy, at least the past 10, 12 years. And it's odd. Now this COVID dip and now this decline again. It's quite shocking to see a decline in public school student count for A and B this year. So I'm sure there's more information to come.
Thank you for your good questions, Nancy and Paul. Of course, a good relationship that we have with OBPP. So I think-
Superintendent, this is Steve White, and I've got just one comment if I could make it. One reminder to everybody and Paul that the numbers related to homeschooling and what OPI gets from the county superintendents, that remember that compulsory attendance age exemption is only from 7 through 16. So it's completely optional for the parent to notify the county superintendent of the 17 and 18-year-olds that are the high school kids. And so those numbers are kind of pretty fluid in that you're going to get from county superintendents for the high school age, because they're not really required to notify annually the superintendent's office. And so that's those numbers are kind of, if they're up or down, it's not maybe because they don't exist anymore. It's just because maybe the parent decided not to notify. So I just wanted to put that into the mix.
Yeah. So, hey, hi, Steve. I didn't know you were here, but glad to hear from you. Yeah, right. There's a recognition of that, and it's always been there. And so we assume that the non-reported student percentage would probably continue to be relatively stable. I don't know that I would expect a larger proportion to start not reporting. So we know that those numbers are not accurate, but percentage wise, we can still look at variations in that to estimate the potential of students moving from public to private situations or homeschool situations. But I'm with you. Yep.
Yeah,
Thank
and I concur with that too, Paul. And the one thing that if somebody comes to me or the county superintendents or whoever ask, what is your opinion of the high school students, the parents continuing to notify? And I always suggest that they do, because that puts a little bit of extra information in the hands of in the file cabinet for proof that they were being homeschooled through high school, and there's no harm in doing it, even though that's the entire reason for notification is for exemption of compulsory attendance. But I'm not sure how you get your numbers for the non-public schools, because there's no requirement for them to annually notify unless there's something that the county superintendents are doing that with their interface with the non-public schools. And a lot of the non-public schools, as we know, are only in the larger communities, but still, I've always kind of scratched my head on that, because it seems like that if you have 150 kids in Petra down here or whatever, that how does the county superintendent know? Because there isn't much interface unless the non-public school reaches out. So I don't know if I'm missing something there. So
Yeah, there's actually a collection for accredited non-public schools for enrollment. Honestly,
correct.
the
Yep.
accuracy of it is also potentially suspect, but just with any data set, if there's no
Okay.
impetus, there is variation in the collection and the validity of that information.
So when you say non-public schools, are you talking about the accredited public schools like Manhattan Christian and those? So you're not really including the non-accredited then?
Yeah, there's no requirement for, and I'm speaking out of turn, but it's my understanding that there is no requirement for non-accredited.
Correct.
I think
That's
there may
correct.
be a request to have that information provided, but I don't think it's as stable as the accredited non-public.
Yes.
set. So,
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Superintendent.
Perfect. Great dialogue. Pam, I don't need to put you on the hot spot, but she has come into it. I know you're a county superintendent in Madison. Would you like to add anything to this?
Oh, I just put in the chat that it does vary by county. Some of our larger counties do not have any communication with private schools, and some of them don't even know how many they have. I do communicate with my private schools. I do have them submit documentation every year. I also said that what Steve was talking about with 17, 18-year-olds, we often don't know of our K and 6-year-olds because they also are not compulsory required. I did say that the extension for county superintendents to upload their data into the OPI system was extended until November 15th. So that's probably why it's not available at this point. That was it.
Thank you, Pam. Any further conversations with this? Paul, I appreciate it. Number one thing, the numbers looked odd when we first got them. And then a solution was reached to using great individuals on the phone, asking for some more information just to try to verify and validate why there seemed to be those 2,000 students not enrolled. But we'll seek further, and appreciate your presentation, Paul. Thank you. We'll move around, and I appreciate everyone's also patience. We're going back to number 3. So Carrie, thank you. I know you're up at the Capitol. We've got some great things that are happening, but if you would like to share with us where we are with notifying the federal government on Montana's plan for rigorous action through ESSA.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. Carrie Koba. I am the Improvement and Engagement Senior Manager at the Office of Public Instruction. And we've been working on many months here on a task force in-house and out in the field, gaining some perspective on changing some of the language we currently have in our ESSA plan. We've been looking at the area in which we're talking about schools that if they do not exit comprehensive support and improvement, there's the next part in our ESSA plan that is required by our federal government of what does it mean to have rigorous action, or what does it look like for more rigorous action. And so we've taken some steps in looking at that language that we currently had, and then rewriting it to best meet the needs of our communities here in the great state of Montana, and to include more of a stakeholder group process and to have more of a tiered, or another word would probably be differentiated approach to those schools that don't meet exit criteria. And so currently where we're at is we're in the last stages of finalizing that language and getting it ready. We need to send it off to the governor's office yet, and we'll be also speaking to the Board of Public Ed this week as well. And then what the other part of it that we're working on right now is working with some outside entities that are helping support what guidance documents and resources that we can put together in terms of what does it really look like, boots on the ground for schools. And so right now we're in the whole process. We do have one more response to public comment. Oh, no, we don't have any more responses to public comment. Forgive me, I was looking at the wrong date. But our goal is to submit something to the federal government in the month of January.
Thank you. Any questions for Carrie regarding this? Main purpose is, thank you, Brian, for scrolling down, making sure then that we have ample opportunity for anyone to recognize what does rigorous action mean. And then I believe, Carrie, that they give us what, 120 days after we
That is
submit?
correct. That is
Mhm.
correct.
In order for them, the federal government, to tell us that we are good or need to do something different. Any questions, Carrie, regarding this and her team? Great, thank you. So the last presentation that we have, or discussion item, is from Rob Stutz, and it has to deal with Indian Education for All and a piece of legislation that Representative Wendy Boy gave to us. If you could increase your screen capability of it, thank you so much.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to be talking about the impact of House Bill 338. That was a bill by Representative Jonathan Wendy Boy that made a number of changes regarding Indian Education for All. And but most specifically today, we're going to be talking about some changes to the reporting requirements. So OPI has created this reporting update. It's an FAQ style piece of guidance that addresses some questions that we've gotten from the field about the Indian Education for All bill. And Brian, if I can share my screen, I do want to point out one part of the bill that is in the language of the bill. So this is House Bill 338, and down here near the end of the bill, there were several new requirements added regarding reporting of programs. And there was also a provision that provides for the withholding of Indian Education for All base aid if reporting requirements are either not undertaken, or if the amount of funds expended for IFA is less than the amount that the legislature has provided. And so when we're looking at the bill, you can see up here, and let me make this a little bit bigger just to make it easier for everyone to read. Here in section 4, paragraph 4, there was some language that was cleaned up a little bit, but it basically left intact the requirement to file an annual financial report with the Office of Public Instruction. But what it did is it added 2 new requirements down here at the end of 4B, requiring new reporting on the instruction on basically the IFA program. And there have been some questions from the field regarding how the language, when it applies. The legislature has provided an applicability section down here in section 7 of the bill that says the new reporting requirements under section 4.4 apply to Indian Education for All funds distributed in fiscal years starting on or after July 1st, 2023. And so the question has come up, what part of 4.4 is subject to that reporting requirement? And the way OPI has interpreted it is by reading the new reporting requirements in section 4.4, because that's what the language says. There are new reporting requirements in 4.4, and those have to do with the programmatic part of the reporting. The annual report is not a new requirement, and so that wouldn't be subject to the later applicability date. What this means is that the regular reporting that occurs has for a long time every year would continue to apply for fiscal year 24 about the fiscal year 23 expenditures, fiscal year 25 about the fiscal year 24 expenditures, but the reported requirements would not apply for the program reporting until fiscal year 25 about the fiscal year 24 program. But because there's that split between when the applicability date applies to part of the legislation, but not the other part of the legislation, OPI has issued this FAQ to explain how that applicability date applies. Bottom line is the fiscal year 24 reporting is going to have an impact on the fiscal year 25 funding because of this requirement in 5A that says if a school district fails to report, then they will not receive, they are ineligible for funding for the subsequent year until the report is filed. And it also provides that if they fail to report that the funds were spent for the purposes of EFA, then their amount that they failed to report was spent for EFA, their funding for the subsequent year must be reduced by that amount that they failed to report. So there are different subsections depending on whether no report is filed or whether a report is filed that shows incomplete spending of EFA funds. But in any event, the subsequent year for the fiscal year 24 reporting would be fiscal year 25. Again, that only applies to the financial reporting. There is that delay built into the applicability section for the new reporting, which is the programmatic reporting under section 4B 1 and 2. Are there any questions?
So this FAQ is available on our website. We've sent it out to, how do I want to say, to our schools through our Compass. It has been out there. I believe Julie has had office hours, and this has also been presented. And we are working to make sure that schools are made whole as possible, so that they recognize what it is that they have to do. And then all our job at the Office of Public Instruction is just to make sure that dollars can be verified throughout this process. Rob, anything else to add to this?
I would simply note that OPI doesn't withhold the EFA funds. We report the information, any failure for a district to report or any underreporting, we would report that to the Board of Public Education.
Excellent. And then the other part, and I know I reiterated this last time we did Education Advocates as well, was to say that there is a section that if indeed that the school districts would like to appeal any of these things, it goes to the Board of Public Education, and the Board of Public Education can hold a hearing for each of the school districts that to further understand if those dollars were withheld or not withheld from their point of view, not from our point of view. Okay, any other questions anyone might add? It was a great conversation today. Thank you for being flexible with us as we are moving our people around in other meetings as well. So with that, looking forward to a very robust end of this week with the Board of Public Ed, the Board of Regents, the Legislative Interim Committee, as well as the Governor's State Board of Education. And I appreciate everyone coming to our meeting today. All of the information that was presented today will be coming forward to you before the end of the close of business today. With that, Thanksgiving is around the corner. We have a lot to be thankful for in Montana. and in our great nation. And I believe that we can double down on that thankfulness for the rest of our world and things that are happening in our world at this point. So with that, blessings to all. Thank you for all that you do to put our children first and our students and families. Thank you.